In this week's episode, I'm joined by Elaine Marino, she, her, Aya, head of corporate social responsibility at Meltwater and founder of the Lady Coders Conference, Yoga on the Rocks devotee, and caregiver to elderly parents. This week, our conversation is about paid leave for period pain, rocking true access in our national parks, queer rights protections in Illinois, and more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. Elaine, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Bernadette. This is really special. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation before we got started, and I'm excited to keep it going. So, can you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. As you stated, I am the head of corporate social responsibility at Meltwater. I sit in Denver, Colorado. I am married to a lovely man, and I am a caregiver to my elderly parents who moved to Denver from my hometown of Los Angeles about 18 months ago. And I have been practicing, social responsibility, environmental social governance, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for well over a decade. I got into this work as a career changer, actually. I started my career in advertising. I worked, as we've talked a little bit about, I worked in New York City and Los Angeles, had one of those big advertising jobs, got burnt out during the financial crisis of 2010 and moved to Boulder, Colorado on a bit of a whim. Wasn't planning to make it my home, but it is lovely here in Colorado. And stayed and then entered into tech, and where I was shocked to learn that I was often the only woman in the building and felt very othered. And here's what's really important about that othering is that it was never intentional. They were so excited to have me. I always was welcomed with open arms. But when you are the only and what I call the lonely, you can't help but always feel different. And everything down to the bathrooms, they were really fancy offices because it's software development, and they were single room bathrooms, but the only ones that ever used the bathroom were men. And so it was like going into the men's room all the time. And just there are things like that. And then there were bigger things. You'd go to a tech conference, a software development conference, and there would literally be 3,000 attendees and like 20 women. Like we're talking really, really small numbers. We'd meet for breakfast. We'd all share phone numbers. It was a very interesting experience. And I just started to ask bigger questions of why is it like this? Where is everybody? Where is everybody else? And so I like to say I was both an insider and an outsider, right? I was inside experiencing it, but I was definitely an outsider also watching it. It is certainly intimidating if you are the only and the lonely in the room.
Yeah.
And no amount of confidence or being good at this is going to make that any different. And so I started to speak out on it. And I got a lot of traction. And so that actually launched my career in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I started out I created the Lady Coders Conference to help women and non-binary software developers find mentors, figure out how to have a path forward. There was this harrowing statistic that 50% of all women leave tech within 5 years.
Wow, that's shocking.
It is shocking. And so I was like, well, if we can get them at the 5 to 10-year mark, will they stay longer? And so there was a lot of work put into that. And then I also started a consulting firm and did that for a number of years, primarily in the tech field. And then was very fortunate. I got tapped on the shoulder to go corporate and became director of diversity and inclusion at Charles Schwab and stayed there for a few years. And that was a really, really amazing experience. One of the best for sure.
That's great. And I know that your current title has corporate social responsibility in it. So that's broader than DEI, and some of the stories in Five Things absolutely touch on CSR. And your current company is global. So can you talk a little bit about what's your purview now? That's a lot, global and CSR. Tell me a little bit about what some of your focus areas are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, you know, it's interesting. Whenever I was just strictly in diversity and inclusion inside a corporation, I always worked very closely with the foundation folks. It always went hand in hand. And on top of that, it also started to become part of environmental social governance, right? The
Mm,
DEI was always the pillar of the social. And so the role that I'm in, because it's global, expanded to include sustainability, to
mm,
include how we report out on our environmental impact, our people impact, and then also how do we treat our key stakeholders, primarily our employees. And so it grows, but it really is all under the umbrella of how the company impacts the world and how the world impacts the company. And so corporate social responsibility is the huge umbrella term for all the initiatives. Primarily, what my focus is tracking our carbon emissions. That's a huge aspect to
mm,
what I and then I work within human resources, the people team, to make sure our systems and processes are equitable. I have
mm.
great, wonderful people team partners. I really am fortunate to have such a great group of colleagues that are constantly looking at how our workplaces, how our work policies, how our promotion process, how our mentoring process. Um, are equitable and fair and at a global level.
In this week's Five Things newsletter, I wrote a little bit about what August has been like for me. Typically it's a quiet time for work, and the gift of time for me means lots of time for pickleball. In fact, I competed in and won a gold. Thank you. In a tournament this past Saturday. And at those tournaments, there's lots of time for conversation and bonding with other folks. And there's a very priceless feeling of belonging that I get from pickleball. But I also am very aware of myself and that I can be very impatient. And many of my problems on and off the court can be tied back to impatience. So my pickleball mantra these days is I'm a patient pickler. And yes, people laugh when I say that, but a lot of them agree as well. And it's just sort of made me think about patience more generally and how oftentimes in conversations we're listening to respond, we're sort of a little bit checked out or a little bit distracted, especially in the social media and cell phone era. And so patience is not always there, but what a gift it is. And so my commitment towards the last half of the year is to really focus on patience. That's my intention. So I wanted to share that and invite you to chime in if there's anything you want to add.
Well, first of all, I think that is incredibly lofty and noble. I think patience is such a goal and so important in this world. I find often things that like get me riled up, if I just like give it space and time, it actually does. I don't want to know necessarily say go away, but ease. Like there's just
Mhm.
an ease that wasn't there when I was riled up. I also really appreciate your patience in listening, right? The
Mhm.
active listening as opposed to listening to respond. I am very guilty of listening to respond. And so I love all of that. I do think you put in there what do you want to work on for the last half of the year? And so I wanted to share mine is an
Please.
analogy someone shared with me, which is to put the rope down. And so what that essentially means is that if you're in this like tug of war, right? Like just fighting something that either you can't win or is just a little overwhelming, to just put the rope down. And I think that's a
Mm,
good analogy to the patience,
mm,
which is just let things be a little bit. And so when I find myself in like deep conflict or struggle, I'm really trying to put the rope down, as you
Mhm.
say. So
Yes, love that. Love that. Wise words. All right, well, let's move into this week's good vibe. The first story this week comes from Portugal, which has enacted a groundbreaking law granting up to 3 consecutive days of fully employer paid leave per month for workers with severe disabling menstrual pain caused by endometriosis or adenomyosis. So, this is pretty groundbreaking because it's naming these specific issues, which are often sort of misdiagnosed or dismissed as just bad periods, but can impact 10% of people signed female at birth. So this is pretty significant.
yeah, I totally agree. I just when I read this, I was like, this is what destigmatizing an issue looks like. You name it, you give people permission to share it, and it also allows companies to honor it. And I think what's really fascinating, speaking from a corporate world, the more that you allow people to be seen, heard, and valued, the more productive they actually are.
Mhm.
And so if you force people to go to work when they're in severe pain or you force them to take sick days, they actually feel less loyal to the company because they feel like they're not being valued. But if you say, we're going to honor you, we understand your insignificant pain, we understand that you have a disease that's beyond your control, that person's going to come back after their 3 days off and feel a sense of loyalty and increase productivity in a way that they wouldn't have if you had made them hide it, made them feel ashamed about their illness. So I'm super
Exactly.
excited for
It
Portugal.
contributes to psychological safety.
It absolutely does.
All right. The second story this week comes from Rocky Mountain National Park here in the US, which is rewriting what public land means by expanding accessibility for disabled visitors. So, upgrades now include a fully accessible bus with a wheelchair lift, 130 new ADA compliant picnic tables, and a fleet of free all terrain grit wheelchairs. And there's even a winter ready wheelchair that plows the trails to make sure that folks can get around all year long on wheelchairs. Pretty cool.
This is amazing. This is so near and dear to my heart. Well, I started the show by telling everyone I live in Colorado. Rocky Mountain National Park is about an hour and a half away. But more than that, I also shared that I am the caregiver to elderly parents, and my mother does have mobility issues. And we figured out how to get her a wheelchair at the Rockies games. We are baseball fans. And it's been just so life-changing to be able to bring her. And even I actually do need to give a shout out to Coors Field. Not only do we get a wheelchair and they're so lovely, but they have accessible seating and they even have plugs. And so my mom has to use oxygen. And so she can plug in her oxygen during the baseball game.
Wow.
So I just see like this for Rocky Mountain National Park as an expansion of what already makes Colorado so great. And I'm so excited to take my mom and my dad to Rocky Mountain National Park in a way that just isn't possible usually. It is not possible for my mom to experience nature like that. So this is huge, and it makes me so proud to be a Coloradoan. I've been here over 15 years, so I feel like I can say that.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that it's personal for you. That's great. All right. The third story this week comes from Live Nation. Never thought I'd hear them on the show, which is turning up the volume on inclusion by certifying 25 of its US and Canadian concert venues as sensory friendly. So this is the largest initiative of its kind in live entertainment. Crew members are trained to support neurodivergent guests, and venues offer sensory bags with calming tools and provide clear signage that directs people to quiet zones and headphone areas.
Oh, I just love this as well. Same thing, I've learned a lot
Mhm.
through my she will always bring earplugs to venues and concerts. Recently, she started to maybe do the headphones like they have for like babies and toddlers because it just really hurts
Mhm.
her ears and it hurts children's ears. And of course, there are those with sensory, sensory needs that go beyond what is usually even considered. And
Yeah.
honestly, with 16% of the global population having some sort of disability, and in that sensory difficulties, I think this is amazing. And I actually loved the quote. I'm going to quote from the article. We're committed to making sure fans feel welcome at our venues, and we're extremely proud of this certification. And that's Carl Adams, the head of venue operations for Live Nation. I just love that. I love that somebody would just openly state, we're so proud of this certification, and they should
Mm,
be.
absolutely. And of course, all of these things are good for business. So
Yes,
the win-win is loud and clear. All right.
absolutely.
The fourth story this week comes from my state, Illinois, which just made history as the first U.S. state to launch a free statewide legal hotline for LGBTQ plus residents. So this is backed by $350,000 in support, and it offers bilingual help with healthcare, discrimination, housing benefits, and identity documents. What a gift for Illinois residents, especially after and Trump administration pullbacks.
Yeah, I just think this is really beautiful. Congratulations to your state.
Mhm.
I I think all anyone wants in this world is to be seen, heard, and valued, and that really
Yeah.
is the definition of inclusion. And so having this hotline just tells that youth that is so impacted that they are seen, heard, and valued, and that there is a place for them. And that's the importance of it. And I really do mean this. If it only gets one phone call, which is not going to be the case, but let's just say they get one phone call, that's not the point. The point is you're telling millions of LGBTQ that they are seen, heard, and valued. And that is really the important statement there. And
Yeah,
so I'm very proud of Illinois for sure.
exactly. Yeah, me too. Me too. The last story this week is an interesting one. It comes from Princeton University. It just reset the financial aid bar, announcing that starting this fall, most families earning up to $250,000, so $250,000, will no longer pay tuition, while those making $150,000 or less will have tuition and expenses fully covered. So it's a huge financial commitment that can help middle class families cover the gap if they're sort of too rich for aid, too poor to pay full fare. So it's really good. But wow, the since affirmative action was overturned, enrollment by Black students has really dropped. And so maybe this is an effort to restore some of that. I don't know.
I think so. I definitely
Yeah.
think so. This is another story that really speaks to my own personal story.
Mm,
I am biracial. My mother is Mexican. My father is Irish and Italian, and I'm mixed ethnicity. And I grew up very middle class. He was a police officer. My mother was a dental receptionist, and I went to a very expensive school. It's in my bio. I went to Georgetown. And every semester, I would go to financial aid and I would detail out in an Excel chart all of their expenses and how little money they had left over for
mm,
my college education to work to get more financial aid. Like I really had to fight to be there. Um, and I was middle class. Both my parents worked. You know,
mm,
we I didn't go without food. I wasn't, you know, in poverty, and yet I couldn't afford school. And so I
mm,
think it's incredibly important if you want to reach children who are, gosh, from different backgrounds, who don't have, 529 plans and
yeah.
whose parents haven't been saving their whole lives because they can't to send their children to school, who are just as deserving, right? I went and got my straight A's and was, part of
Mhm,
the student body, and played school
mhm,
sports, but you have to be exceptional at those things in order to get full scholarships. You can't
yeah.
just be a really good kid from the middle class and afford to
Yeah.
go to Princeton. And so good for them for seeing that. I do think it will help in terms of socioeconomic status. And I think that is actually where universities are going. I think they're recognizing, because that is protected under all these new rules, that socioeconomic status is still very much protected. And so that's why this law is in place to try and turn the tide on those numbers going down in terms of Black and Latino students entering into these universities.
Well, when more universities enact similar rules or policies, then you can be sure I will cover it. on 5 Things in 15 Minutes. All right, let's move into this week's Good Vibes to Go. I'll share my good vibe to go, and then I will invite you to share your good vibe to go. My good vibe to go is to check out the show Acapulco on Apple TV Plus. It is a really charming, delightful sitcom, and there's lots of dialogue in both English and in Spanish with subtitles, and it's a delight. This is the fourth and last season is currently airing. Elaine, what is your good vibe to go?
Well, first of all, I'm going to take you up on your good vibe. I watched the trailer from your newsletter and I was like, this is adorable. Oh my goodness. And so I can't wait to watch it. Thank you for the recommendation. My good vibe to go is Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. I do quite a bit of work in South Africa. I listened to his book. So I know I'm holding up the book, but I highly recommend listening to it. Talk about a good vibe. He is such an entertainer. He does all of the accents. He gets personalities going. Like I really felt like I knew his mother in the story. It's a memoir of his childhood. And it gives you such an insight into what apartheid, what the system and processes of inequality does. But it does it in a way that is so accessible and so interesting. And it's just a really all around good story. And even if you're not a fan of The Daily Show or of his comedy, it has nothing to do with that. It is just a man's story about growing up mixed race in apartheid Africa and South Africa. And it is really, really beautiful. And so if you want a good vibe, and also it's funny because he is a comedian and I openly laughed and giggled many times. It's high and low.
I concur. I loved it. I also listened to it, and it's a performance, right? His audiobook is an absolute performance, and it's hilarious. And yeah, I completely agree. Awesome. Well, Elaine, how can folks get in touch with you? You have been such a delightful guest.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. People can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. Feel free to ping me. And that's probably the best way to find me. And it's just Elaine Marino on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's been great having you this week. And folks, if you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Thanks. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.